Hey everyone, this is Mary Beth McAndrews from Dread Central, and I am here today with Bess Wohl, writer and director of the new psychological horror mother in horror film Baby Ruby. Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. I'm great. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm excited to chat with you about this one. And just for any of our viewers who are not aware, I kind of tease a little bit, but can you just give us a little synopsis about Baby Ruby and what it's about?
Sure. Baby Ruby is about a new mother who uh, has a baby, and it goes very differently than she might expect or hope. And it's sort of a psychological thriller about not just a mother, but also a father, a couple sort of navigating parenthood from the very first time, and takes you on sort of a wild journey of what that's like for them, and the sort of many rabbit holes that they go down.
Yes. So there are a lot of movies like in the psychological thriller and genre space that deal with pregnancy and motherhood. So what were you looking to kind of add to this conversation and do with your film that other films maybe haven't done before?
Yeah, I knew that there had been a lot of work done in this space. A lot of what I had seen was actually made by men. So I think in part I
Yep.
was, yep, obviously Rosemary's Baby being sort of like the iconic,
Yeah.
the sort of mother horror, but that's really a man's fantasy about pregnancy, not from a female perspective. So I was really interested in coming at it from a female perspective, which is my perspective. I'm a woman, and I felt like that was important, but also, I just felt that there's a lot more room to tell these kind of stories in honest, authentic ways, and it's interesting because Kit Harington, who's in the film and who plays the baby's father, really related to it from his point of view of being a new father when we made the film. Yeah, he
Oh.
just had a baby. I think he had about a 4-month-old at the time. So, you
Oh
know,
wow.
he was really deep in it. And he was actually reminding me of things that I had forgotten. I have 3 kids, but they're a little bit older. My youngest is 4 now. So Kit was, reminding me of things that I had forgotten. But, I just, and I'm very heartened by the fact that more, non-male filmmakers are making films about parenthood and all. I'm very heartened
Yeah.
that the conversation is widening and becoming more inclusive, and that filmmaking is widening and becoming more inclusive. And this felt like part of that.
Yeah. Well, my one of my favorite things about this is how you portray kind of intrusive thoughts, which is something I've dealt with, not obviously not as part of postpartum depression or anxiety, but just as someone who has OCD. And I haven't seen intrusive thoughts really represented so truthfully, and how
Mm.
scary and violent that can be, and how like incredibly disorienting they can be. And something that you really achieve in this film is that very thing. And I just wanted to hear more about like what kind of how you were like pictured in writing those moments, and also just in filming them and creating these violent moments with babies on camera that I think obviously they're just thoughts, but they're really important for people to understand that like these are not unusual. Unfortunately, like a lot of people deal with this.
Completely. And, one of the things that really surprised me when I became a mother was how with all of the feelings of bonding and love that come with the experience, there also is a lot of anxiety and terror
Yeah.
and a lot of intrusive thoughts. And I had, experiences where, I would close my eyes at night and I would just see my baby like falling through the air, or something, these moments of sort of terror. Um, that accompanied the experience, and I didn't feel like a lot of people talked about that, and how scary they can be, and your body doesn't necessarily know like what's a real experience and what's a thought.
Yeah.
So you go through all of the physical sensations um of these experiences, even when they're thoughts or fantasies or fears, or so that was really striking to me. And I felt that feeling of not knowing what's real and what's not, and the body not knowing the difference, was a really powerful part of that, the experience of motherhood, which for me, with all of the wonderful parts of it, just came with a ton of anxiety and still does.
Yeah. So it sounds like this came from a personal place, somehow, somewhat at least, right? I mean, you have children, and it kind of so there was like a lot of personal moments kind of imbued in this story for you.
Yeah, I always like to tell people that, it's not autobiographical. I'm not Joe, obviously. I'm first of all, I'm not a gorgeous French influencer like Noemi Merlant, the actor who plays Joe, is so beautifully portrays her, so yeah, that it's not an autobiographical story at all, but it is often in my work. I like to take the seed of something that is true for me, which is, as you said, this sense of terror that can accompany motherhood. And just push it as far as possible, push it to extremes in fiction that, thank God, aren't the things that occurred in reality.
So there's a scene that involves a dog and a bone and some terrifying, and I we actually shared a clip of that on Dread Central, and I was really into that kind of like really shocking imagery, and I was curious about where that kind of idea came from for you, and like where you kind of came from these shocking moments that are like, oh my God, but they feel so real. Oh no.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for pointing that one out. I that's one of my favorite moments in the movie too. It's
Oh really?
so yeah, because it's so bizarre, and it's such a weird thing to think, but and yet at the same time, like it's so true, our brain can just take us in all of these, incredibly
Yeah.
unexpected directions. And so I think that really came from this sense of, as I said before, like this terror that any particular moment can be, if you take your eye off your baby for a second, something really scary can happen. I think that's one of the sort of more frightening parts of parenthood in general, is that, any parent has this incredible responsibility for their child. And there's a sense that, like, if I look away for a second, is that the moment that something bad is going to happen? And, not to terrify parents out there, because you can't live your life that way, right? You have to sort of live with this trust that you can look away for a second, you can walk out of your baby's room. But the fact is, there's this sort of constant hum of terror. And I think part of what happens in that scene is Joe and Spencer, the baby's parents, relax for a second and go to sleep. And they almost have this fear that they're going to be punished for going to sleep by something horrible happening, that they've relaxed their vigilance for just a moment, and that they're going to have to pay a terrible price for that.
And you mentioned Noemi Merlant, and she is an incredible actor. And I would love to hear more about your experience working with her and having Joe start off as this very confident, put together influencer who's so quickly just realizes that, oh my God, this is nothing like especially the scene in the hospital. Again, I think these realities of the physical effects of birth are never talked about. And like a lot of my friends are giving birth, and I ask a lot of questions because I don't have kids and I'm annoying, but I'm always so curious. And like, we don't see like you have to poop or like the copious amounts of bleeding, and you really put this like reality to it. And I'm curious what that was like working with Noemi to really give even more humanity and reality to her character's journey.
Yeah, it's interesting because Noemi has not given birth herself.
Okay.
And after making this film, she told me that she probably never will. I think I've traumatized her. But I feel like she's just such an incredible artist, and she's so game she's kind of up for anything. I mean, there's a sort of scene that's shot in a sort of elliptical way, but about the birth scene. And she was just completely ready to throw herself into that. When she commits to something, she doesn't really hold back. So I think she really was fearless. And I honestly think, we had a great rapport, and she from the beginning just really trusted me, which was extraordinary because this was my first film, and she had no idea really who I was or whether I was going to take care of her, but we just immediately had a very great sort of trust between us. So I think that also had a lot to do with her being willing to put herself in my hands and go to places. There was never a moment where, you know, I said, we're going to do this, and she balked or stepped back or hesitated. She was just incredibly generous in that way. And also, you know, she's somebody who, yeah, she hasn't given birth, but she understands what it's like to be afraid. She understands what it's like to feel a little bit, you know, unhinged from reality or not sure what her reality is. You know, she was able to bring her own experiences and her own fears and sort of layer them on top of this experience, and just give a totally riveting performance.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned this is your first film, but you've done a lot of playwriting and directing, and you're really accomplished in that space. So why now movies? Why move into this space?
I know. I asked myself that question a lot on set. Why am I doing this? I could be in a nice climate controlled theater, and instead I'm standing in 100-degree heat. No, but seriously, I think I think I really felt compelled to tell this story, and I felt that I hadn't seen a version of new motherhood or parenthood portrayed in the way that I experienced it. So I felt very passionate about telling this story, and I felt that film was the right medium for the story, because film is so psychological in a way that theater to me is more sort of about community and society, and sort of we're sort of seeing bodies in space in a certain way, and we sort of come together. It's a gathering. Film feels much more sort of solitary in the way you interact with the film. You're sort of in the dark, and especially now with all of the sort of streamers, there's a very sort of, like you said, you watch this sort of alone in the dark. There's a very sort of one-to-one experience that can happen. And also the way that perspective and sort of unreliable narrators can function in film in such a interesting, dreamlike way. So I felt like I really wanted to be seeing through her eyes, and I felt that a camera needed to do that. So it was less that I wanted to be a film director and found a script, and it was more that I had a story to tell. I knew it should be a film, and so I sort of taught myself how to make a film in order to serve this particular story.
That's so cool. Would you make another movie?
Yeah, I want to, actually, which is wild because it's hard, but it's funny. I really think it has some similarities to childbirth, in that, you know, when you're in the thick of it and someone says to you, like, are you gonna have another baby? You're like, are you kidding me? No sane person would do this more than once. But then a year out, 2 years out, you sort of think, oh, I want to do this again. You know, there's an amnesia effect, but strangely, there's some similarities for me between having a baby and making a film. And one of them is that it gets kind of addictive and you want to do it again.
That's amazing. Well, I'm excited to see what you make next. But I don't just make this might, well, I'll say out of spoilers, but there is like some queerness in this movie that I wasn't expecting, which I was really excited about. And I loved this queerness because births and having babies is very heteronormative, and this imbuing queerness in this narrative was really interesting and cool to see, to put, like, for lack of a better word. And I just wanted to hear more about your choice to put a queer kind of storyline in here and kind of navigate queerness, especially within motherhood.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, I always start from the point of view of character, and think about Noemi Jo, the lead character, and her sort of what happens in the film is that she becomes fascinated with these really idealized mothers who seem sort of unattainable and mysterious, and they draw her in, and she can't quite figure out what their secret is. So to me, that sort of manifested as desire for them, and to be like them, and to be one of them from her character's point of view. At the same time, also, like, when you have a baby, your relationship to your sexuality and your body changes irrevocably. And I think that she's sort of navigating that. I mean, there's a line sort of late in the movie that the mother that she has a relationship with, that you sort of don't know, is it real, is it not, but she has like a sexual encounter with this without spoiling, with this mother, and the mother says, like, I just feel really like I've lost my femininity, kind of like I don't know who I am anymore. I feel
Yeah.
so with myself. So they're trying to discover something together, I think. And what they're trying to discover is a sort of female desire together that connects them. And I feel like there's a way that their relationship sort of exists in this bubble outside of the patriarchy, outside of like the sort of
Yeah.
the thing that they've both been told they should be in terms of
Yeah.
the perfect mother. They get to kind of discover something else together that feels to them a little bit transgressive and seductive and scary and alluring. And so they kind of create this space for female desire, especially as Jo's relationship with her husband is sort of decaying and disintegrating under the sort of like iron fist of domesticity and this heteronormative relationship and having a baby and all of the things that she's been taught that she is supposed to want. The relationship she has with Shelley, the mother, sort of gives her a window into something else that she desperately also wants and needs.
That's amazing. Well, then on the other end of the spectrum, you have a mother-in-law character, and we are so used to seeing mother-in-law characters as like these nuisances. And at first, she kind of is. She's barging in, asking for, "Oh, I couldn't possibly impose. I'm starving." Like we get that kind of. Obviously, that's a little bit of that kind of expected stereotype. But then there's really tender moments where she is able to really identify with Jo and share her own struggles. And I just wanted to hear more again about developing her character and giving us this more nuanced perspective from motherhood from like an older woman. Again, we don't see a lot of like nuanced older women characters in this kind of genre. So I was also refreshing to kind of subvert those expectations as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I really wanted to pull a little bit of a bait and switch with that character and she comes in and you think that she's, as you said, the sort of stereotypical nosy intrusive mother-in-law, and she definitely has those qualities, but as the movie goes on, she becomes a truth teller in a way that few other characters in the movie are. She really offers Jo a lot of truthful advice and also help in moments when she needs it. So she's not what you expect. And, I felt, and Jane Atkinson, who portrayed her so beautifully, I thought, I think we both felt by the end that in a way she's sort of the secret heroine of this film, because she really saves the day in a way, and I won't give it away, but she comes through when she's needed. And what more could you really ask of somebody in your family?
Well, and there's just such an incredible sense of matriarchy in this movie that I think you don't think about at first because it is a lot about Jo and her own experience. But as Jane Atkinson's character kind of comes up and we see more of these relationships between women, this really feels like a movie that's trying not to put words in your mouth about your movie, like reject patriarchy a little bit though, and show like matriarchal support systems that are really important and the stories that women have about their experiences that no one else can share, and what happens when those stories aren't shared between women. And I think it's just cool. It's just it's neat to see that in a world of films that don't necessarily always go that way, in that direction, and prioritize matriarchal support systems.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's like the other women in the film sort of become sides of Jo in a way too. I think there's ways to think about it, psychological and also sociological, as you said, but definitely, I was really interested in showing these different moments in the life cycle and different sort of stereotypes and tropes, from the intrusive mother to the Stepford wife to, the perfect domestic environment, all these different tropes that become so incredibly oppressive and actually insidious, and sort of explode them a little and offer, hopefully, by the end of the film, like a space beyond the sort of constricting nature of these different identities.
Yeah. Well, so this is like a psychological thriller with some horror elements, but I'm curious, are you like a horror / psychological thriller fan? Are those films that you gravitate towards personally?
It's interesting because I like them, definitely. I'm not a huge horror head. I know people who are really deep in it, and I respect that so much. And I think I'm more came to horror and the psychological thriller because of needing to tell this story and feeling this was naturally
Okay.
a story that existed in that genre, rather than sort of first being a fan of a genre and then looking for a story that matched it. I really had to educate myself on the genre. I mean, I knew obviously films like I had a certain sort of stable of films that were reference points for me, everything from The Babadook to Black Swan, to Don't Look Now, The Shining, obviously Rosemary's Baby. You know, there were
Yeah.
movies that were like in my sort of head as I was making them, and then this, and our cinematographer had a whole sort of stable of his own of reference points that he shared with me that we went back and forth with. But I wasn't somebody who was like, oh, I can't wait for, you know, the next like really scary disgusting movie. And in fact, I had to learn how to shoot, you know, jump scares and scary sequences sort of as I was going to tell the story.
That's so cool. That's amazing. Well, are you now do you have a deeper appreciation now of horror? Are you a horror fan now?
Yes, I really am. I love it so much now. I want to make another one. I mean, I don't think I'll ever be you know, the really like serious gross out film director.
Yeah.
Although I really appreciate that kind of work. But I do feel it's funny because you know, I don't know if it's that as I've gotten older, like the world has gotten scarier, and so horror has become a more appealing genre to me, or I just am discovering parts of it, you know, in this particular moment in life. But I do find that it's a really beautiful way to tell a story that can be both incredibly involving and exciting, but also often have a real social message, or you know, a point, which is kind of my sweet spot. Like I want some people to be entertained and enjoy the film, but I also always want to be saying something that's meaningful to me.
Awesome. Well, Bess, thank you so much for chatting with me about Baby Ruby. I really appreciate you taking the time.
It's so kind of you. Thank you for watching the film and for having me. And it's just really a delight to get to talk to you about it. I really appreciate it.